Welcome to our Stitch by Numbers. This is going to be a tutorial on how to do the most commonly used stitches which we use in all of our Pixie&Me designs. You may just be here practicing, or if you've got your design, you're simply going to look at the numbers that's on your design and then match it to the stitch that we're going to teach you. Now, if you have the Pixie&Me kit, we're going to be using the sharp needle for this. We also have a needle threader, and I'm just going to quickly show you how we use these. We are going to grab our needle threader and just pop our needle onto it, so it just sort of hangs off like so. And then we're just going to pop our yarn around the hook and just simply pull through. This is going to make life so much easier. Okay, let's get started with stitch number 1. This is the back stitch, and you're going to thread onto your needle approximately about a good armful worth of yarn for this. So we're just going to start at our starting point, which is going to be here at the bottom. We're going to bring our yarn through and then just make sure to leave a tail underneath to tie off to. The space that we're going to be using is approximately 1/2 centimetre. So we're just going to take our needle 1/2 centimetre forward and just pull that yarn through. Once that's through, we're going to leave another 1/2 centimetre gap and bring our needle up from that spot, and then we're just going to take our needle back into the end of the previous stitch, and this is how we do a back stitch. We're going to repeat that process again, just bringing our needle up 1/2 centimetre and then just tucking our needle into the end of the previous stitch. And we're just going to continue like this all the way to the top. Now, the back stitch is a very beginner friendly stitch. It's a very easy stitch and one that's used very commonly for outlining things. We often use the chain stitch also for that, but if you're wanting an outline that's a little bit more softer and not as thick, then the back stitch is definitely the right one to use. It's a great outlining stitch and one that you will be definitely using a lot of. And we're just going to pop that final stitch in, and then when we turn our garment over, this is how we're going to be tying off. I've got my threaded needle here. I'm just going to take it all the way down to the starting tail just by doing a whipped back stitch. So we're just going to bring these two tails together so that we can then tie them off together in a triple knot. And there we have it. That is our first stitch number 1, the back stitch. Stitch number 2 is the chain stitch, and this is another stitch that you'll be using very frequently. It is used for a lot of lettering and for outlining also. We're just going to bring our needle up from our starting point. We've put another good arm's pull worth of yarn on there again, leaving a small tail underneath. Now for the chain stitch, we're just always going to make sure that our yarn is off to the left, and you can use your thumb to hold it in place here. And then we're just going to take our needle and we're just going to pop it through the hole that we just came up from. And we're going to bring our needle up about 1/2 centimetre again, and you're simply just going to pull that through, and you'll see here you've made this gorgeous little chain. We're then going to move our yarn again off to the left, and then we're going to take our needle through the chain that we just created to about, again, 1/2 centimetre, and then we're just going to pull that through. We're just going to repeat that process again, so bringing our needle up about 1/2 centimetre and just pulling it through. And like we said before, the chain stitch is a very versatile stitch. You'll use it for things like filling in a space, you can use it for lettering, or you can use it for outlining. It's a really great stitch. And now that we're at the top, we're just going to anchor that down with a little stitch. So we just go over the top of the last chain and pull that through. And then when we turn our garment over, we'll see we've got our threaded needle and our starting tail, just like we did with the back stitch. We're just going to do a whip stitch all the way through until these two tails meet, and then we can tie them together in a triple knot. And that is for 2, which is our chain stitch. Now I'm just going to show you an alternative method here called the reverse chain stitch. I've just done one chain and I've anchored it down. Now I've brought my needle up 1/2 centimeter away from that chain, and I'm just going to use the opposite end of the needle and thread it through the previous chain and then just anchor it down again. And we're just going to keep going like this all the way to the top. Now some people find chain stitching on the stabilizer a little bit taxing on the fingers, so this is a really good alternative method if you do have that problem. I do find it takes a little bit longer to do this method, but it can be nice for a bit of a break if your fingers do sort of hurt when you're pushing through the stabilizer. So once that's all done, you're just going to flip over and you can just tie off exactly the same as you did with the previous method. And that's our chain stitch and our back stitch. Now let's move on to the French knot. Now the French knot is a bit of a love-hate relationship with a lot of people. Personally, I absolutely love it, but I do understand it's not for everybody. Let me show you how I teach it and see if this helps if you're finding this stitch a little bit challenging. So we only need a small amount of yarn, probably about 1/2 meter, and we're just going to lay the garment down. I find this easier when doing the French knot. Now we're just going to take our yarn that's pulled through our garment and we're just going to create a C shape. You're then going to bring your needle to the top, so above the yarn, and you're going to wrap it around 3 times. You're then going to take this left hand and give it to the right hand, freeing up your left hand now to go under the garment and take the needle. With that free hand, you're now going to lift your garment and be ready underneath for the needle to come through. Your needle's going to come through your garment, but make sure it doesn't go through the same hole that you came up from. There's some yarn here at the bottom. We're just going to give that a little tug, and as we maintain that tension, we're going to push the needle through. Once you can push it through, and it will be a little bit tricky at first, we can see you've made this gorgeous little French knot. So we're just going to flip over and we're going to tie these 2 ends together into a triple knot. Okay, let me show you how we do that again. So I've brought my needle up from my starting point and I've made my C shape. My needle's gone to the top and I'm wrapping it around 3 times. This left hand is going to give the yarn to the right hand, and we're going to lift our garment up and thread our needle back through, but not through the same hole. Once we're here, we've got this bottom piece of yarn. We need to give it a good tug to create that knot, and as we maintain that tension, we push the needle through. Remember, there will be some resistance. You just have to give it a really good hard pull to get it through. We're then going to tie off with a triple knot and snip away any excess ends. Let me just show you one more time so that you are really familiar with it, because I know this one is a little bit tricky and it's a bit of a love-hate relationship with the French knot. But if you keep practicing, you will just master it. It becomes very, very easy. Stitch number 4 is the long and short. Now we've got this little box here which we're going to fill with our long and short stitching. You want to put a good arm's pull worth of yarn because we want to fill this whole space in one go. And then we're going to start in the middle. I don't know why, but I always start my satins and my long stitch through the middle. I don't know if this is just me or if everyone does this, but this is how I find it's the most easiest. So once we've pulled our yarn through, we obviously are keeping a tail underneath to tie off to. We're going to start here with our long stitch, so we're just going to pop that in. It's just a simple straight stitch. And then next to that, I'm just going to pop a small stitch, so that's just going to be a shorter stitch to the one that we just made. Next to that, I'm going to be popping another long stitch. And then once we finish that one, next to that, I'm going to be popping again another short stitch in there. And then we're just going to finish off this box with a long stitch. I'm just going to bring my needle to this top section now, and in here I'm just going to be putting a short stitch, and a bit like when we do our back stitch, our needle's going to go into the end of the previous stitch. And now next to that you'll see there's a nice gap there, a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, and it's going to fit a beautiful long stitch in there. So we're just going to pop that one in, and then next to it, you got it, we're going to be putting a short stitch in there. And then on the next one, you'll see we've got a nice long stitch gap where we can pop a long stitch into there. And we're just going to continue like this until this whole box is filled. Now the long and short stitch is a great stitch for filling in space. So I like to use it for things like when I'm doing animal fur. I think it's really great. I love the randomness of it. You don't have to do it so uniform. There are no rules with any stitching. You can really do it however you want, but you can do it on an angle. You can do it vertically, horizontally. I just don't see why there would be any restrictions for anything like that. I personally love to use it for filling in lots of faces and animals and things like that, and it does give a really sweet fur texture, so would highly recommend it for something like that. But I really love this stitch, and when it's all finished it always looks really nice together. And that's it. Once we flip our garment over, you'll see we've got two tails that we can then tie together. We might need to, yes, we're going to just take a needle through and bring it closer. And then once they're together, you can tie them together in a triple knot and snip away the excess ends. And that is our gorgeous long and short stitch. Stitch number 5 is our satin stitch, and this is a stitch that you will be using all the time. This is one of my most used stitches. So I've taken a good arms pull again, and I'm just going to pull that through, leaving a tail underneath to tie off to. Now with the satin stitch, I again like to start in the middle. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I do. I like to start in the middle, work right to left, but it's entirely up to you how you do this. You can start from one side to the other, that's absolutely fine. I just find doing it this way keeps me more uniformed. So we're just going to do lots of what I would say straight stitches, but they're a group straight stitches, so they need to be nicely uniformed and even. And sometimes I do this, you'll see here, where I'm just kind of like eyeballing where I'm going to put the next stitch, and it just helps me keep things really nicely lined up. So I'm just going to fill in all this section here to the right with some really neatly uniform straight stitches. So now that we've finished the right side, we need to do the left, but we need to take our needle over to the left side. And to do this, we're just going to take our needle and thread it underneath our work. Now we're on the left side and we continue and fill in that section. And that's our beautiful satin stitch all complete. So to tie off again, we just need to take our needle and thread it back to the right, and then we can just tie those two ends together in a triple knot. The satin stitch is a beautiful stitch to use to fill in some spaces, but you can only really use satin stitch when the space is short. So you can't do a really long space with a satin stitch, otherwise you'll get lots of sagging. But it's a great stitch, one of my favorites. Stitch number 6 is our woven wheel. So this is how we create our roses, and it's a very beautiful stitch. It's very satisfying to do as well. A lot of people really enjoy this one. I teach a lot of classes, and quite often my students will say that this is their favorite stitch. So we're just going to leave a tail to tie off to later, and we're going to start by bringing our needle into the middle. And once we have finished that first leg, we're then going to take our needle off to the right and repeat the same thing. And we're just going to finish that for all 5 legs of this woven wheel. So now that we have our 5 legs, we're just going to bring our needle to our starting point. For some reason, I just always start here. And the method that we're going to be using here is over, under, over, under. So we're going to go over the first one and go under the second one. So let me show you here. So we're going to ignore the first one, we're going to go over it. We're going to take our needle under the second one, and then we're going to go over this one and under this one. So we're going to take our needle, it's probably safer to use the blunt end to go through, over this one, under. So pull that one through, keeping our yarn nicely in the center but not pulling too tight. So over, under. And we're just going to continue like that, over, under, all the way around until we fill in this whole section. And what you'll notice soon is that a beautiful rose is starting to form. And now that our rose is beautifully formed and nice and full, we're just going to anchor that down with a stitch. And once we flip over, we've got 2 tails here, which again, we're going to tie off together in a triple knot. And now when you flip our garment over, you'll see we've got a beautiful rose that we can add to pretty much anything. Stitch number 7 is our lazy daisy. So we're just going to thread on another armful of any color that you like. And this is how we do our beautiful little daisy flowers. We're going to use the woven wheel for this again. You don't have to use this, but it's just a good little practicing tool. And once we bring our needle up, make sure again we're leaving a tail underneath to tie off to. We're then going to take our needle back down through the hole that we just came up from and pull it all the way through until we have this lovely little loop. So you can see here that's going to be petal number 1. I'm just going to move that out the way for now and bring my needle to where I want it to sit, which is going to be the top section of our rose. So we're going to hook our little loop over and pull it through. Once we're there, we're just going to anchor that down with a stitch. So we're just going to go over the top of the little petal and pull that through. And there we have our first little petal. Now making sure we're not going through the exact same hole, because we do need a little bit of space in the center for our French knot, we're just going to bring our needle through again and repeat that process. So making sure we go down the same hole for our loop, creating that little loop there. This is petal number 2. And then we're going to put our needle where we want it to sit, which is off to the right this time. Hook your loop over and pull that through. And then we're just going to anchor that down again with a little stitch over the top. And we're just going to repeat that now for the next 3 petals. Now it's really important to mention when you bring your needle up from your starting point to make your next petal, try not to use the same hole, because if we have a big hole in the middle of the flower, we won't have any fabric to hold on to when we do our French knot. And once we've put our last petal in place, we're then going to flip our garment over, and you'll see you've now got 2 tails here again, and we're just going to tie them off in a triple knot. Once your daisy's finished, you can then go back to the French knot tutorial if you need to, and we're just going to pop a little French knot in the center to create that middle part of your flower. Stitch number 8 is my favorite. It's the basket weave. This is just such a gorgeous stitch. It always looks so lovely, and you can use it in so many different ways. So I've just put a good arm pull worth of yarn onto my needle, and then we're just going to go in and start on the right hand side of our basket weave. Now you'll see on this box I've put some lines, and these are the guidelines that we're going to use to start off with first. So we're just going to bring our needle up, make sure to leave a tail underneath, and we're just going to fill in these lines first. Now I'm going to bring my needle up from the bottom left hand section to start, and I find it's also easier to hold your garment in the way that you're stitching, so you'll see me do that in a minute once I untangle here. So I'm going to move off to the right, so we're just going to turn our garment, and then we're going to do over under again. So we're going to go over under, and pull that through, and then we're just going to anchor that down with a little stitch. Now you might need to use your needle just to straighten things up a little bit. So we're just going to push that down a little bit. Then I'm going to bring my needle just above where I've just anchored that down. And then we're going to do the exact same but the opposite way. Now we look at the stitch that we did on the last row, which was under. So we're going to start with over. And this is the trick here to give it that really gorgeous basket look. So then we're going to pull that through. And then we can anchor that down again with a stitch. And you might need to just take your needle again and just give it a little move around. Then we're just going to do the same thing again, coming up slightly from the previous one. Now our last stitch was under, so we're going to start with over, and we're just going to go over, under all the way through, and then pull it through and anchor it down again with a stitch. And this is it. We're just going to keep doing this method until we have filled up this whole grid. And once you've filled all your grid, you've got a gorgeous little basket weave. I just adore this stitch. It's so, so beautiful. And then when we flip over again, we're just going to tie these two little threads together in a triple knot. And even though this gives a basket effect, you don't have to use it just for that. You can use it pretty much anywhere you like. It would even be gorgeous to fill in a nice space. I used one the other day just to create a microphone. It looked really, really great. So yeah, this is a great stitch that you can use for so many different things. Next up, this doesn't really need a tutorial. I'm pretty sure you all know how to do a straight stitch now, but we needed to add it in. So here we go. Number 9 is the straight stitch, and this of course is very self-explanatory. It's just a simple straight stitch. And of course, once we've finished, we can just tie off as we usually do with a triple knot underneath. And the final stitch that we're going to be doing in our little practice sheet is the leaf stitch. So this is a gorgeous one for adding leaves to your flowers. We've just put on about 1/2 meter of green yarn. We've left a tail underneath, and we're just going to take our needle to about 3/4 of the way to fill this space here, and we're just going to take it down. Now we're going to bring our next stitch about 1 millimeter underneath where we just put our previous stitch. So let's pull that one up. And then we're just going to take our needle back into that same center where we put our last stitch. And we're going to repeat this on the other side as well. So remember, coming down about 1 or 2 millimeters and then bringing our needle up. This just gives that leafy shape. So it's really important to bring your needle down slightly and not do it next to the previous stitch. Otherwise you won't get this effect. So we're going to come down again about 1 or 2 millimeters, bringing our needle up from that point. And then again, once we've pulled that through, we can take it into that center spot once again. And we're going to do this again on the other side, bringing it also into that middle point. And we're just going to add one more either side just to give it a bit more of a fuller leaf. Now you can add this to your rose. It looks adorable on the base of the rose, so you could do 2, 1 on each side, or you can add this to your stem, so you could do a back stitch stem and then add these gorgeous little leaves onto it to make a gorgeous little wildflower garden, since you now know how to do roses and daisies. So once that's in place, you can then flip your garment over, and of course we've got our 2 tails there. We might need to bring them together, so we're just going to do a whip stitch underneath and bring them together and tie them off in a triple knot. And that's all of our top 10 stitches created. So now you can get one of our stitch by numbers kits, and you'll see that all the numbers are outlined on where you should put your stitches. Then you can come back to this tutorial and learn or refresh on how to do them, and then you can create pretty much anything. Now if I turn this garment over, you'll be able to see some of these stitches in action. This inside the bear is our long and short, so you can see how great it looks to fill in spaces. We've also used the satin stitch for the paws and for the bow, and for the outline of the bear is our trusty back stitch. The name, of course, is in our chain stitch, so you can see when you use all these stitches, they all come together looking absolutely beautiful. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and happy stitching, guys.